says, hey, I'm a slave of God and I've been sent by Jesus Christ. And every Christian has a calling to be sent, but every Christian will not go where God is sending them if they haven't first decided to become a slave. And we talked about the idea of being sent last week, this idea of being an apostle. And there are the types of apostles like we're back in the Bible, but the idea of being sent is for every single one of us. We are sent as ambassadors or representatives of who Christ is. And so Paul begins this letter by saying, hey, I'm a slave of God. I've been sent by Jesus Christ to help you, Titus, and the people in Crete, because this is where Titus was, in the island of Crete, to catch on to this one good promise. Look with me in verse 2. In the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised long ages ago. So a long time ago, God promised a hope of eternal life. Okay? And Paul says, I want to help you guys grasp this one good promise that God made long ago. The promise is from long ago, and the reason for that is because the problem or the trouble started long ago. And that's why the promise is from long ago. So if you go back to Genesis chapter 1 and 2, God created the heavens and the earth was without form, and everything was, there was void on the face of the earth, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the deeps. And God said, let there be light. And when he spoke, he began to create. The first thing he created was light, and then he starts creating all these things. Eventually, he creates his crown of creation, and that's mankind, us. And after he creates everything, he says it was good. And at the end, he says everything was very good. And so here we have this creation, and God has created everything perfect. He's good. He takes man, and he creates this garden now, and he puts man in the garden, and he takes from man a rib, and he creates woman, and now he has man and woman in the garden. And he tells them, he says, listen, I've created everything good for you. Everything is good. And here's the thing. There is a truth that I need to let you know of, and that there is this thing called evil. And there's a tree represented in the garden known as the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says, so here's the deal. I've created everything good, and I will manage your life. I will do everything because you cannot manage evil. You'll never be able to handle it. So you just trust me, you depend on me, and I will take care of you, and everything will be good. Right? And the problem then starts in chapter 3 of Genesis, where Adam and Eve decide they don't want to depend on God. They want to figure out this thing called life on their own. And so what they do is they go ahead and they do exactly what God told them not to do, and God promised them something. He said, I'm telling you, if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And so they decided to, I guess, play around with that. And they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and eat. So Eve is deceived. She eats. She gives to Adam. He eats freely. And realize, hey, this is not good anymore. This is not good anymore. Nothing is good. And so in Genesis chapter 3, we see that there's where the trouble started. Everything was good. They decided to disobey. They decided, I want to live this life on my own. I want to manage it. And then once their eyes were open, they realized they couldn't manage it. They couldn't manage this thing called evil, this thing called sin. And so after that, then, God begins to provide for his people. And as you walk through it, you see the trouble just gets worse. Cain kills his brother Abel. After Cain kills his brother Abel, God puts a mark on Cain's head so that when he goes off to a place called Nod, that he's, no one kills him. And if anybody kills him, God says, I will take vengeance on him. Then there's this guy by the name of Lamech, and Lamech kills more than Cain kills, and he boasts about it, that I've killed more people than Cain, and if anybody comes after me, then I'll avenge myself. Now God's not the one avenging, man's doing the avenging, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then you come into chapter 6 of Genesis, and you see this idea that there was these sons of God, which are angelic beings, and they come down and they have sex with women. And when they have sex with the women, they create these giants called Nephilim, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And finally, God comes to a guy by the name of Noah. And he says, Noah, he said, I found you to be righteous, probably not meaning that he was perfect, but probably meaning that he at least trusted and depended on God. And the idea was, Noah, I want you to build a boat for me because I'm going to destroy everything. I'm going to start over with you. And so him and his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives and 2 of every animal and 7 of every clean animal get on the ark, and boom, the floods come and he wipes everything out. And then Noah and his family get off the ark, they make an altar, they worship God, and they begin to spread out. And one son and daughter goes one direction, one another direction, one another. And pretty soon, everybody has one language. And we have this story in Genesis chapter 11 of this place called the Tower of Babel. You've got a guy by the name of Nimrod. And he is now deifying himself, or they have set him up as a deity. And they are building this tower into heaven. and we won't talk about the complexities of this, but the idea is that they're trying to either reach the heavens in God or they're trying to be like God. And God looks down and says, listen, they have one language. There's nothing they can't accomplish. So they keep doing this. They're going to get themselves in a bad spot, so we need to do something. So he comes down and he confounds their languages and he scatters them all out. One of the places, it's called Babel. So, when people talk all weird, it's Babel, right? So he confounds all their languages and boom, they're gone. That was actually the beginning of what is known as Babylon, eventually, as you look into the future. So again, here we have this corrupt people who have decided to manage the life that God has given them that was supposed to be good on their own. And that's where the trouble kept going. So it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So after that, then he scatters them all out. And then you have this guy in chapter 12 of Genesis by the name of Abraham. And God comes to this guy by the name of Abraham and says, Abraham, if you will follow me, if you'll go where I tell you to go, I will make you a great nation. And from you, I will bless all the other nations of the earth. And it says that Abraham went. He got up and went, and he took his wife, and he took Lot, and he took his servants, and all this stuff, and he went to a place that God was going to show him. And from that point on, then, God was determined that he was going to fulfill this promise and this hope of eternal life, and that's how he was going to work it out. And so Abram, of course, if you read through the Old Testament, Abraham goes, and he has sons, and these sons have sons, and it just keeps going, and eventually it's going to come to this guy by the name of David. And then David's going to be the king, and then eventually we come to the New Testament where we see the Messiah shows up, Jesus Christ the Lord. So this is this idea of a promise that God has made. The promise that all the way back when we first decided that we were going to manage life on our own, it was already good, but we decided we were going to manage it on our own, and we messed it all up. And you say, wait a minute, Adam and Eve messed it all up. No, you and I messed it up. Because after Adam and Eve were done, then we were born. And let's face it, when we were born and mom and dad said, do this, and we said, no, I'm doing this, every single one of us messed it up. There's not one of us that's not guilty. Not one. Paul tells us that. The psalmist tells us that. All of us are guilty of messing it up. And so we messed up this good thing. And Paul is saying to Titus, listen, you can get this good thing back. You can get this good thing back, but it's going to be from a promise that was from long ago. And that promise is the person of Jesus Christ. And if you decide to put your trust in this person of Jesus Christ, you can get it back. This is the message. The Word, you go to John, the Word is Jesus Christ. The Word was manifested to Paul and the people of Crete and to us, to those who place their faith in Jesus Christ. And if we place our faith in Jesus, we can be made brand new. And when we're made brand new, we can start to learn, all right, to love what is good. That's how we start getting back. We can start to learn to love what is good. And that's what this book is about in Titus. We can start to learn to love what is good. We can start to teach what is good to others. We can start to be beautiful examples of what is good. And then eventually, as that happens, then other people see that and they are drawn to the good one. And when they're drawn to him, then the same thing can happen in their life. They can decide they want to follow him, and they can learn to love what is good, and they can teach what is good, and they can be beautiful examples of what is good. And that's the book of Titus as we go through it. And so this morning, I want us to look at this one good promise, and I want to start with this concept of faith. All right? The concept of faith. So, Paul says, I'm a bondservant, I'm an apostle of Jesus, for the faith of those chosen of God, for the faith. Now, what I want you to do is you can just turn a couple pages to your right to Hebrews chapter 10. We're going to look at the last couple verses of Hebrews chapter 10, and then we're going to look at the first verse of chapter 11 to try and figure out what this concept of faith really is. All right? Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36 and 39 says this, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. You see that word promise in Hebrews chapter 10. After you've done the will of God, that you may receive what was promised. What was promised? Well, eternal life, Christ Jesus. Verse 37, for yet in a very little while he who is coming will come and will not delay. 38, but my righteous one shall live by faith. There's that word. My righteous one shall live by faith. Verse And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. Verse 39. But we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preserving of the soul. To the preserving of the soul. We've talked about this before. You realize that our flesh, our bodies are not what's most important. Yes, our bodies will be resurrected again, but there is a deeper part of who we are, and that's the soul. And that's where this faith comes into. So now look with me at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. The writer of Hebrews says this. He says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Does anyone else have a different translation? All right, what does yours say, Becky?
Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see.
Okay, does anyone else have a little different version of that? Yeah, Gene.
Faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen.
Okay, all right. Now, let's take a look at this because my version that I read, which is the inspired perfect version, it's a little lacking here. This is the New American Standard that I read from, and it's a little lacking here. Faith is the assurance. The word there, assurance, is a Greek word which means confidence, or it could mean assurance. But I think confidence is probably the better word. But the idea, when I read mine, it says assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. It almost makes it sound like everything's internal. Like it's an assurance of something I'm hoping for. Like I hope it's true, but I'm not quite sure. But I really hope inside that it's true. And then it's a conviction. And usually convictions are inside me. They're things that I believe in. I'm convicted of them, they're inside of me. But if you use these words that probably are the better translation, the first one, confidence, like my faith is the confidence. I have a confidence in me of the things I'm hoping for. But then the next word there, the next Greek word is, instead of conviction, I think the better word there is evidence or proof. Evidence or proof of things not seen. So the idea is this, that although faith begins inside of me, it then is brought about by proof and evidence around me. So what happens is I begin to taste what I believe inside. I begin to taste it. I begin to touch it. I begin to feel it. I begin to see it. And then that produces in me what faith is supposed to be. It's not just internal, but it has proof. There's a reason why I believe it. So let's start this way. Could everybody do me a favor? I have a little something in here. I have a jar in here, okay? And I'm not going to tell you what's in the jar, but I'm going to have you all close your eyes. Then I'm going to walk around and I'm going to ask someone, I'm going to open the jar, and I'm going to ask someone to smell what's in the jar. So if you would like to smell what's in the jar, just raise your hand. But then after that, okay, I got a guy over here, always right here. Then after that, I have a plastic fork. So after that person smells it, okay, now somebody else is going to be willing to taste it. Okay? Now nobody knows what's in here. Doug says he'll taste it. He doesn't even have to believe yet. Right? So this guy over here is going to smell it, and he's going to tell us, what he thinks is in the bag. Doug's going to taste it. He's going to tell us what he thinks is in the bag. So everybody close their eyes, all right? Everybody close their eyes. All right? No peeking. Oh, man. Mitch, can you open it for me? Hold on. I probably just ruined it. No, everybody will smell that. All right, keep your eyes closed. You got it? Yep. All right, keep your eyes closed. What do you think it is? Well, yeah, tell me what you think it is.
Honestly?
Yeah.
Sauerkraut.
Oh, my God. You wish it was sauerkraut. All right, everybody keep your eyes closed. All right, just open your mouth. Don't open your eyes. All right, Doug, what do you think it is?
I know it is sauerkraut.
Oh, you know it's sauerkraut. All right, everybody open their eyes. Now, this is what faith is. All right? Now, faith is what is an internal thing. You begin to reason. So now we have two witnesses, and there are tons of witnesses throughout the scriptures about this person named Jesus and this God who created all things. But we have two witnesses. This witness over here never tasted it, but he sure smelled it. And he says there's sauerkraut in there. And so how many of you would believe that there's sauerkraut in there? Okay, and why do you believe that? You've got good reason. There's no really reason for him to lie, right? You've got good reason to believe that. Now, Doug tasted it, and he believes there's sauerkraut in there, right? How many of you would believe that Doug is telling the truth that there's sauerkraut in that bag? What you're doing is you're exercising faith. But here's the difference. You are exercising it on the witness of other people. But this faith that's being talked about here, where Paul's writing to Titus and saying, hey, I'm writing to you for the faith, is that he's going to start telling them things, and he's going to start telling them to start experiencing things so that they can taste their faith. So see, Doug is sure that it's sour. You're not really sure. I mean, you're telling me for 100%, you know for 100% that there's sauerkraut in here.
Sure.
But it's based on his. You haven't tasted it. Now he smelled it, but even he hasn't tasted it. Paul is saying, I'm writing to you, Titus, and I want you to teach these people how to love what is good, and how to teach what is good, and how to be beautiful examples of what is good, so you can start to taste the good one. That's faith. That's what faith is. Now, if you want to, after service, if you really want to, you can come up and you can open up the bag and you can see, and that'll be exercising your faith. You can open up that. It's the same thing with this gospel. If you open up the gospel and you begin to investigate and you begin to look, it's just like opening that bag, and then you can taste some sauerkraut in here, and you start to go, oh wow, God is sauerkraut. Yes, he definitely is. Yes. All right. So you can do that. That's faith. So that's what faith is. Everybody got that? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Faith is not blind. You would be crazy to just believe in Jesus just because somebody said to. But there's proof. There's proof everywhere. Not just here, but there's proof because Jesus has changed life after life after life. All right? So that's what it is. So I hope that sauerkraut's good for you. That's good. I was told there were certain people that I should not put sauerkraut in their mouth, and that would be a bad thing, right? So if you read the rest of Hebrews 11 when you go home, you will notice something. That every single one of those people in the Hebrews, this is called the Hall of Faith, all right, in Hebrews 11. If you read there, you'll see it was people who trusted God, they stepped out on faith, they did what he told them to do, and then they tasted it and experienced God, and then they realized he's trustworthy. I can have faith in him. See how that works? And that's what Paul is trying to get people to do. He's a bondservant. He's sent by God so that Titus might give a good reason to the chosen people of God to love what is good, to teach what is good, and to be beautiful examples of what is good. And for what? Because of one good promise. And so let's begin to look at this one good promise. Let's look at the chosen of God. All right, that's the last part we're going to look at today. So you have faith, and it's for the chosen of God and the truth according to godliness. But we're going to talk about the chosen of God. Who are the chosen of God? Well, let's look at it this way. Isaiah chapter 41 says this, but you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen. So this goes back to Abraham. Remember I talked to you about Abraham this morning real quick. Abraham makes a great nation. Eventually they become known as Israel under Jacob. Okay? And so they become known as Israel, and God says, I have chosen you, you whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and I've called from the remotest parts, and I've said to you, you are my servant. See, this language is so beautiful because the idea here is that at the end of the day, God is still king and we are his servants. We are his bond servants, his slaves. And so you are my servant. I have chosen you and not rejected you. I have chosen you and not rejected you. You see, part of faith is believing that. When I say I have faith, I have to believe that God has chosen me and not rejected me. And sometimes that's hard, especially when you've grown up with a lot of rejection in your life. You've grown up with people who make you feel like the only way you're valuable is if you do something for them, or that you're never going to be good enough. But God, the God of all creation, says, Israel, I have chosen you and not rejected you. And you will say to me, you'll say, but Brian, he's talking to Israel. I understand that. He is talking to Israel. You're exactly right. That's good exegesis. That's very good. That's very good exegesis. He has chosen Israel. However, read the context again and look what he says. You whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its remotest parts and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not rejected you. Because that promise from long ago for Israel, remember Abraham, I will bless you, but what? I will bless all nations through you. And so God said this promise from long ago is going to be for all people from the remotest parts of the earth. I want to bless everybody with this promise of eternal life. John 15:16. Jesus, talking to his disciples, said, listen, you did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you that you would bear fruit and that your fruit would remain. Interesting choice of language. Jesus tells his disciples, you didn't choose me, I chose you. Later on in John, Jesus will talk about the idea that no one can come to the Father, or no one can come to the Son unless the Father draws him. And so there's been entire theologies. And this is why I told you that this book of Titus, we're going to walk slowly through it, because there's so much rich understanding here of who God is. But people will look at that and they'll go, see, I have no choice. God chose me. I can't choose him. And so how am I going to be saved? That means God just decides who, so I'm not going to try to follow God on my own because he chooses me, I can't choose him. And if I'm going to be drawn to Jesus, the Father has to draw me to him. And so there's entire theologies that are totally worked around this idea that you have no choice, you have no free will. And therefore, if you're going to be saved, well, it's like luck of the draw for us, but God, in his perfect mind, he has chosen the people he wants in his family. But you have to go back again to Israel, because he said, I've chosen you, Israel. Who's Israel? The remotest parts of the earth. So everybody who will come is chosen. Everybody who will come is chosen. You go back to the Old Testament. If you will draw near to me, what? I will draw near to you. That's faith. So if you and I will exercise faith, if we will go the extra mile to go, God, show yourself to me, he will reveal himself to us, and then all of a sudden faith begins to rise up in our soul. Faith to believe. The idea of Jesus dying on the cross, Jesus says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. Now listen, we're not going to get an argument here. If you believe that God chooses people and they don't have a free will, then go ahead and believe that. But at the end of the day, there is a mystery throughout the entire Bible that tells us that God, in his perfect goodness, has chosen all mankind, and there are some who will choose to have faith and some who will not. And one camp says God's the one who decides those people have faith, and another camp says we get to exercise that faith, and when we do that, God chooses us. You can believe whatever you want there, but at the end of the day, you have to come back to this idea that it is faith in God and God alone that saves. Faith in God and God alone that saves. And I believe that you and I have a choice, and I also believe that if you feel any kind of inkling in you of God calling you to believe, that you need to act on that faith, because when you act on it, then that faith is not just internal anymore. He'll begin to show you proof and evidence, and it'll become real in your life. But if you don't act on it, if you continue to do the things that you want to do, and you continue to manage your life on your own, and you don't trust God to show you proof, then you'll just keep living the same way you've always lived, and you'll keep walking further and further from God. But you've got to exercise that faith. I mean, these scripture texts are all over the place. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him. I had a guy one time, I was sitting in a theology class in Bible college, and there was this good old homeboy. Is that what you call him? Hillbilly? I don't know what you call him, but he had a southern accent. I would call him a homeboy, right? And so he's sitting there, and he's got this twang in his voice, and we're talking about John 3:16, and the professor is very strong that, you know, there are certain people that are elect, and those are the only people that can go to heaven, and you don't have a choice and all this stuff. And the guy, he sits up in his chair, he hears this stuff, and he raises his hand at the professor and he said, well, if God chooses people and you can't choose him, then why didn't God say that, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever he picketh should not perish but have eternal life. So when he said picketh, that's why I said I think he was a homeboy or, hillbilly or whatever. Whoever God picketh. Why didn't he say that? Why didn't he just say, and our professor just kind of laughed and we all laughed and there was really no answer. Because I got to tell you, there's a mystery concerning this whole idea of salvation. But there is no mystery around faith. Faith is a real thing. It's a thing where if you sense God saying, hey, I love you and I've chosen you and I'm calling you out and I want you to learn to love what is good and I want you to learn to teach what is good and I want you to be a beautiful example of what is good, then you and I have to step out in faith. And when we step out in faith, God will begin to show the proof, and that proof then will increase our faith and it will become real in our life. And that's what you and I have to do. We have to step out in that faith. So that's where the chosen people of God come from. You might sit here today and you say, well, I don't know if I'm chosen. I believe that you're chosen, but you have a choice to follow that. Every single one of us have. I have a choice this morning. I had a choice this morning to get up and decide to continue to follow the God who chose me. Now, some people will say, no, you didn't, Brian. God's making you do that. Well, if he is, praise God. I'm so glad that God's making me do that. But at the same time, I can tell you this. I got up this morning and there's been several mornings where I've gotten up and I didn't feel like choosing God. And I felt that stirring in my soul. And I said, God, you know what? I can't make it today without you. I need you desperately. And he showed me proof and he walked me through it and he increased my faith. And I decided, you know what? I don't ever want to not choose to follow him. And so he continued to increase that faith. And this is the chosen of God. So this is the idea of this letter to Titus. Paul is saying, Titus, man, I'm a slave to God. Why? Because, well, God chose me. Well, how do you know God chose you, Paul? Well, for Paul says, I was on this road in Acts chapter 9. I was on this road to Damascus, and a light shone around me and it knocked me to the ground. And I heard this voice, and then I was blind for 3 days. And then this guy by the name of Ananias, God spoke to him, and he came to me, and he said, hey, you're going to go and suffer great things for Christ. And the scales fell off my eyes, and I was able to see again. And I've decided, from this point, God is real, and I'm following him with everything that's in me. Everything that's in me. I'm giving up my whole life, so I'm a bondservant. And God's told me, he said, I'm sending you the Gentiles. And so he sent me. So here I am, Titus. And I am here to proclaim to you. I am here for the faith. I am here to see people find proof and evidence so that they can learn to love what is good. So they can learn to teach what is good. And so that they can be beautiful examples of what is good. So that the people in Crete will start to desire the only good one. And that's Jesus Christ himself. That's what the letter of Titus is about, and that's why Paul's writing, for the faith of those chosen. Let me ask you this morning, is there anybody here who believes that their faith is where it needs to be? Your faith is strong and on the money. I mean, you are where you need to be. I'm glad I didn't see any hands go up. Well, okay, well, here's one. Oh, go ahead.
No, I don't. That was a trick question.
It was a trick question. Because I hope your faith is good, but listen, there's not a single one of us, that don't need an increase in our faith. I pray all the time, God, help. I even pray, God, help my unbelief. I need help in my unbelief, God, because I don't know if I can believe this. There have been things that have happened in my life in the last probably 4 months that I've prayed specifically about. God has done it, and then the enemy has come back in and tried to make me not believe what God has done in my life. And I have to go and say, God, help my unbelief. And then God shows me something else, and he increases my faith. That's proof, that's evidence. Not only that I'm believing in God, but now I'm starting to see more and more that, man, God, not only did you choose me, but you want me to be fruitful. You want me to start to love what is good, and you want me to learn to teach what is good, and you want me to be a beautiful example of what is good. And the more and more my faith grows, the more and more I want to do that. And so I think you and myself, I think that we can have the worship team come, but I think every single one of us should be whether it's in your seat or up front or however you want to do it, you should at least ask God, God, increase my faith. If you're here today and you say to yourself, I don't even know if I'm chosen. Well, if you're asking the question, you don't know if you're chosen, then you're probably feeling a call of God saying, hey, I'm choosing you. And if you will come to him with just faith, just step out and say, God, I bring everything I am to you, and I surrender everything I am to you. I don't know how to do this. But I know I've walked away from your goodness, but I will learn to love what is good. And who knows, maybe one day I'll teach others what is good. But I also want to be a beautiful example of what is good, because I'm tired of living the life I've lived all my life. Let me tell you what, if you have a feeling, if you have a strong pull, or even a slight pull to that, I'm telling you, God's choosing you today. God is making a choice. He's saying, I want you to learn to love what is good. I want you to be a beautiful example of what is good. And all you need to do then is reach out to God and say, God, I want you to save me. Would you make me a new creature, a new person today? And I'm telling you, he will come in and he will do what only he can do. Nobody can lead you in that prayer. Nobody can tell you exactly what words to say. You just cry out to God and you say, God, I need you. When you say that, he will come in and he'll begin to change you. And you will be a chosen one of God. Would you take just a few minutes and think about that this morning?
I'm hurting, broken within, overwhelmed by the weight of sin. Jesus is calling. Have you come to the end of yourself? Do you thirst for a drink from the well? Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Leave behind your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes of your life is calling. Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for purchasing our life back, grave. The death that was due to us, you took on that death so we can have life in Christ. God, we want to have it abundantly. We praise you, O God, for the promise that if we put our faith in you, we can be the chosen of God, a people for you that can learn to love again the way you love, that can be examples of your love to the world around us, all that we can be changed to make it. So you can keep your eyes closed this morning. Here's what we're going to do. We have the communion elements here this morning. We want to make these available, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to, if you're here this morning and you know that you are a chosen one of God and you have put your trust and your faith in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone, I want you to get up and come, and I want you to take a cup, a piece of bread, and go back to your seats. And wait, and we'll all take it together. And if you're here today, for the first time, you've decided, you know what? I want to be a chosen one of God, and I have said, God, here's my life, take it. I want to learn to love what is good, and I want to be an example of what is good, and I want you to change my life. And you too are a chosen one of God. And because of that, you've been bought with the blood of Christ. And Christ has told us that we are to, on a regular basis, come to this table and remember that he shed his blood for us. And he gave his body up for us. And so for the first time, you can come today and you can remember by taking this little cup of juice and by taking this piece of bread, you can remember the body that was broken for you and the blood that was shed for you. It doesn't do anything special necessarily for you, but Jesus has asked us to remember what he's done for us in this way. And you, for the first time, can come today and remember what he's done for you. Oh, what a glorious thing that will be today. So what I'm going to do is, as you feel you're ready, I want you to get up and I want you to come. I want you to take from the cup and take a bread and go back to your seats. And once everybody is served, once everybody has done that, we'll go ahead and take together.
Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen.
On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread and he gave thanks. And he broke it. And he told his disciples, he said, "This bread is my body. It's broken for you." And every time you eat it, you remember. You remember I gave up everything for you. I died and I took all this pain so that you don't have to anymore. So that you can be rid of the sin that has caused your destruction and your pain. You can be rid of it all. Let's take it easy. The same night he lifted up the cup. He said, "This cup is the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for you." You take and you drink, and every time you drink, you remember, I poured out my blood for you so that you could have life eternal. Let's drink. Oh, Jesus, we need you. We desperately need you. Increase our faith, oh God. When you gave up everything for us, and we confess, God, that it is not an easy thing to give up everything. But as your chosen people, would you increase our faith so that we can love what is good, so that we can be examples of what is good, and we can teach others what is good. God, that we can be done with this thing called sin. We live unto righteousness alone, godliness. God, do in us what we can't do for ourselves. Thank you so much. Is there anyone here this morning, maybe, that just has a thanksgiving or a praise or some worship? I'll tell you what, this week, keep after God. Keep asking Him to help you to smell the sauerkraut, to taste the sauerkraut, to increase our faith, so that we would be inspired and moved to give up our whole lives to follow Him. Everything to follow Him. That's what He's calling us as disciples to do. So you have a good week. The Lord be with you.